Next up, we have the events. Events. For anyone that used the previous kit, they knew that I had a pretty big issue with how you set up events and how you can start building them into your level. Before, when you create a event, you had to pretty much reload the level or restart the whole game over again to get that new event over to the new database. Now, I tried to make it a little bit smarter, so any new event or any event in general that the system will try to read into a level, it will see if that event exists in the source database first. And then what it will do is it will go to the active database to see whether that event is disabled. If it's not enabled or disabled in the source database, whatever the default state it is in the source database, that's what it's going to use to be able to know that it should be there or not. This is pretty much put in to ensure that you can have a forward development cycle and not the fact that every time you add something in, you have to start back over the beginning and keep going forward. Again, for the people that's waited this long for me to put this in, apologies and thank you for the wait. Again, all your feedback that you've given me and things like that, I've put towards trying to make this system better, especially to help out anyone out there that's like me trying to struggle to figure out how in the world I can make an RPG by myself. And that way I can try to see if I, with all the stuff that I've learned over the years, to try to implement some kind of system or tool to be able to make that a little bit easier and a little bit modular. With the modular setup in general in mind, that's how I tried to make these events. I have a background of using RPG Maker a lot, which helped my understanding of how to do all this in general a lot easier. RPG Maker has a modular approach to trying to piece together events to where you can say, hey, move this character over here, drop this character over there, spawn this item in, things like that. Mind you, with the system like this, you wouldn't need that deep in depth of actions. But just on a general play of a RPG, I tried to bring over as much as the normal standard stuff that you would need to do within events, to be able to process an interaction within the world. So you can have it to where you can add and remove party members, items, money, award EXP, move the actor to a given location in the world, play different levels of audio. Character customization is a new one I've added to the system to be able to kind of like something like what you say with like Rockstar games where in Grand Theft Auto you can go to your home, go to your wardrobe, and then all of a sudden you enter a little customization area where you can customize your character. That kind of thing I really like, and I kind of wish that you could do that in an RPG. Final Fantasy XIV kind of has something like that to where you can go to your room and click the little bell and get, hair designer to come out to, allow you to change your appearance and things like that during the course of the game. In many cases, that's my main vein of making this system, is to be able to have the ability for the for the player to just customize their character. Things like you can still lock down things like skin tone and things like that if that's important to you. Me, I wanted to be able to change any aspect of my character because no matter how, in my opinion, no matter how your character looks, it's still your character in your story. It just, looks different. But in general, like I showed in the previous video, each of these events are just singular events that I made in the database. And if I can bring up the database manager and load in the database. So let's see, 421 content, And of course, like I said before, it must be in the RPG_system folder, and it must be in data store for your database source. And I'm going to open this real quick so we can see the events that's actually saved out to the drive in a second. And I'm going to open the source. So with this source and under events, we have all the individual execution of these skills, of these event types that I have within the world. With that, I actually have an event sequence that is technically a quest or a storyline progression that is linked from one event to another to another to another. And in general, that's how you want to set up events. There have been some people who asked, how can I make a quest with this system? This is how you would make it. You would say, hey, with this one event that is default to enabled, I want all of this to happen. At the end of that flow, I want that event to enable another event. And I want this event to disable. Mind you, I don't have that here, I think. Let me see, turn back, jump down. I do have it. So inside of this event, once you jump down to the new area, I disable event 13 and enable event 17. And what that'll allow me to do is say, hey, this part of this storyline is done. I want to enable this other branching storyline or these other events now that I've completed this one. Cancel. There we go. Cancel. All right. So in general, these are all the individual events that I use to test each individual event out in a singular environment to make sure that everything works with this individual operation. And then you have actual events that are a combination of all these things put together. Let's see. I think I try to explain that same thing here. Time of day, we have the different event stores. Now, these type of objects, you will probably have a single event on. So, the inventory person that's standing behind a bar or a counter or whatever, and you need to interact with them. This would be where you set up a single individual event. For instance, the armory. All right, I'll just do weapons. So inside of the weapons, you can come in here and say, hey, I want this to be an event for, a level 1 store or a level 1 through 5 store in this specific area. So that way every vendor within this whole region will have the same inventory setup, and they can, your character come in here to buy these assortment of items. And that's where, the reusability of these specific type of events can be, reused over and over again to be able to set up generalized economies within like certain areas and levels of your game. And then when they progress to a new area, then they, you get access to no more of the lower level stuff, but you get more of the higher level tier stuff. Sorry. Let's see, cancel that. So now with all the events, once you can actually, get a grasp of these and how they work, it's just basic triggering an event stack. You can create things like save points, which is another just single save event that is activated with this object, this save point object that I've created. These are already in the blueprint form. You can drag and drop out the save point. You can change what the save point looks like if you want. I tried to just I attempted to make a crystal. It didn't look like the best in the world, but it's something to be a stand-in for whatever you want to make. You got treasure chests in general, which are can be event driven, not fully, but like I said before in another video, I tried to make these to where certain level of interactions with the world could generate an event, or opening of a given chest here could start the progress of events down the line, or start a cut scene, what have you. Again, you got resource points. There's just like a treasure chest, but maybe a little bit different presentation wise. If for some reason you don't want to be able to have a treasure chest, you want this to be like an item on the ground that the person can see and go over, interact with, and touch. I'm trying to see if I should do this in another video. I'm just going to do it here. The big part of events is, this is my biggest test of the event system, is to actually make a cutscene animation that will work with the system, with the event flow, and have everything trigger in an orderly fashion within a sequence. And the sequence is usually just where you can make a movie compilation within the engine that will execute the animation in whatever order. But again, going back to Final Fantasy, which has pretty much been part of my life for the last 5 years of MMO playing, I've tried to analyze and break apart the general flow of how they had their cutscene set up, to try to see if I can replicate that myself. This is my attempt. I think I did pretty good at it, minus the animations that are completely awful in the actual video itself. Well, inside the sequence itself. But one thing that I needed to make sure that I could bring out is the fact that the actors in the cutscene will update no matter what equipment you have. And that was one thing I was trying to scratch my head around, because I was thinking I need to be able to have the actual actor that you're playing as be in the cutscene, but the sequencer doesn't do anything with those particular objects. They use just basic skeletal meshes. So what I did was I adapted their object into a custom object called the RPG cutscene actor. And what this will do is it will load up a given actor that's stored in a database with all its customization information, equipment, and things like that, and load them into a cutscene environment with all that stuff arbitrarily attached to the actor itself. And what that gave me was the ability to be able to actually go out and customize a character, do things with the character, have them change, and have those changes actually appear in the cutscene, which was a big milestone for me in general. How it works is you just drag out your actor like you would do in Sequencer. So you drag out your cutscene actor into the area. You can go down here to setup, and then what you can do is select whether you want this character to be a warrior or a mage, or if you have another actor that's not even playable, you can have that actor in the list, which means you also need them in the database set up as an actor. Just like you would set up a character or an enemy, you would set up a actual a general character in your game as an actor, and you can set that actor up to be part of a cutscene. So whatever equipment you want them to have, whatever armor and stuff that you want them to have, can be inside of your actual actor setup. And if they change throughout the course of the storyline, that could be something that you update the database with, so that way the other actor that you don't control can actually progress in looks and customizations, and automatically adapt to different cutscenes for whenever they show up in your world, if that makes any sense. So if we can open the sequence, Let's see if I can attach the camera to the viewport. All right, so as we go through the sequence, everything pretty much will start playing. I do not have enough screen space for this. So, okay. So all the way back to the beginning of the sequence. I have those cutscene actors attached to this, or attached to the sequence. You know, pretty much when you drop it in, if you don't know already, you can just go and import your actor from the level and put them into this timeline to be able to control. So with that general process of the scene, when the scene starts, it will automatically load whatever current customization you have. If you notice in the demo, my characters didn't look like this at all inside the cutscenes because they already had general customizations by the time they got to this point. To be able to keep in line with how my breakdown for the Final Fantasy 14 or even Final Fantasy 11 cutscenes operated, I wanted to be able to have a sequence playing that is pausable for player interaction, keep motions active inside of that actual cutscene to be able to give you a chance to be able to read the dialogue or hear the dialogue, and then be able to interact to be able to say, hey, continue the cutscene. The only way I was able to actually get that kind of operation is, I don't know how new this is, but it's new to me at least. The thing that they added here is to be able to bring in blueprints that can receive additional event receivers. And what I did was make an RP sequence event manager. If I can bring that up here. Where is it? It should be highlighted. There we go. And what this manager will allow me to do is to pause a sequence and start it back up. Before, all of this had to be programmed into the level blueprint, which made it not modular, not easy to use at all. Because pretty much you had to reprogram event stops and event starts per level, per sequence, and that was just not usable at all. Since I can use this now I have the ability to just add other functionalities to that blueprint that I want, but I get the main ability to pause a cutscene if I wanted to. I get the ability to trigger the other event flows for my system. So pretty much how this works is you come in here, it gets to this point of the timeline, and I say, hey, I want to be able to continue my event. So I say, hey, continue the event flow from here. Before, when I start the sequence, it's starting the sequence and it just waits there until something tells it to continue. And pretty much this event callback will cause the RPG side of the system to say, hey, continue to the next event and let's load it. Even though this cutscene is still running, it still lets you continue the event flow. So anything you have inside of your stack for operations will activate every time you call continue event flow. And then once you get here, this in between frame here, as you see, there's this animation and this animation for the characters. This is just, I don't fully have it that way, but what it should be is a loopable idle animation for what just happened in the cutscene. So right now, if we pause here, then we should see the character in the background, arms folded, just in a little looping state to be able to have their arms folded. And the character in the foreground is just standing here in an idle state that will loop until whatever interaction needs to happen for the cutscene to continue happens. So you get dialogue on screen from the continuance. So you come in, you get the dialogue that happens right here. You wait for the actual interaction for the dialogue, which will trigger a new event to play the sequencer at this new point, which will activate another dialogue sequence. So if we look here, this says continue flow. And if we look at here, this is a pause. So that way we will get a cut to the next event. It'll play the dialogue that I have in the event, and then it'll pause here until I, read the event in general. If we want to look at the event flow in the actual state, here in the sequence, we have Sister Complains, which plays the scene at 0. We have the dialogue that starts of, person talking to the other person, blah, blah, blah. We say that, okay, once we finish with the dialogue and we hit next, or if the dialogue is set to auto continue, it will auto activate the next sequence without human interaction. So then we say, hey, after this previous dialogue sequence, we want to continue forward the cutscene, the sequence from this specific frame. Then it goes to another piece of dialogue where it pauses, cut to another frame, blah, 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 until you get to the part in the cutscene where it asks you for a choice. This is where I wanted to see if it was possible to try to keep all of this within one cutscene, which made the jumps and cuts more important for the flow to be able to happen. Luckily, I was able to get this with the way that the system is set up, so that way you can get some kind of player choice. They can give, whatever opinion the end user want to give for an actual option, and then you can have branching paths based on that. With this one, I just had it pretty plain and simple to where, hey, if we don't jump down, we turn back. When we turn back, we'll go into this other event flow. This starts animation, starts dialogue. It moves the player to a place that's outside of the cutscene environment, because before we started this cutscene, we walked into a event trigger to start this cutscene, and we don't want to be there when we come out of the cutscene. So I say, hey, move the character to this location and then play the remaining of the cutscene. So that way we can have them outside of the area to trigger the event again, and then allow the person to come back into the cutscene whenever they're ready, if they want to. If we go back and then into this choice branch, what this one will do is it will play the animation of him jumping down in a very horrible way. It will, start the dialogue. It'll teleport me to another temporary area to be able to place my character for when the cutscene is over and fades back into the game. It will disable the previous event, or the current event, which is 13, and then it will enable the next event that I am not currently using. But I left in just specifically so I can show how you would enable another event trigger. This is supposed to enable the ambush, which was supposed to be a boss fight that I had set up, but I did not have enough time for the release of 4.21 to be able to create an enemy, to create some kind of battle mechanic for a boss, and actually implement that into the end part of the demo. At some point, I still want to do that, but for right now, this is just a good example of how that would be executed in general. So you create an event with this a long stream of, dialogues, event triggers, things like that you would normally have in any kind of RPG setup. And then at the end, it will trigger an event to enable and then its event to disable if you want to. And then that's it for this one in general. Let me back out of this, cancel that. And then if we go to ambush, see, I had something in here set up to be able to dynamically start a battle based on a monster group that was set inside of the start battle. And then, at the end of the battle, you have continuing dialogue that does certain things, plays another animation montage to remove blocks out of the way that was blocking our path. And then it disables itself and enables the next event for the other map in general. Speaking of events for the other map, if I go in here, this looks like it just does a event zone trigger to, send you to the other map. But one thing that you can do is you can have events that trigger based on entering a map. So let's say that after we beat the boss and we did something, we went into another map, we wanted something to happen. So if I wanted that to happen, I can change this to, congratulations or whatever, right? I can change that to congratulations, put some kind of dialogue that's going to happen in the other map once we enter it. And then I can set the map trigger here to say, hey, within this next level, when I load up, see if this level is part of the actual next area. And then if this event is enabled, when we load into the next area, it's going to say, hey, I see that we should be activating an event right now that is currently enabled. And then once the level loads in fully, it will start that event trigger and start processing that event as soon as you enter that new area. Which in certain cases, you may not want to do that at the beginning of a level. For like if you have an event that moves from one level to another, you may have the previous event set up all the events and then manually do a zone trigger. So if we go to move to level or location, we can set up here a specific level and a specific point in that level that we want to load the character in. That's not a regular zone point or beginning of the map or or a docks area. If we were supposed to be in the commissioner's house, for instance, we would make a specific entry inside of the map zones and say this is the commissioner area with this specific location for your actor to start at for a cutscene. And then when you do that, within that area, once you load into the area in that specific area, if that event is enabled, then it will say, hey, we're supposed to be doing a cutscene based on the previous event that enabled me. We're loading this map, place the player here, and then start this event sequence to be able to continue whatever dialogue or event stream that you have going on. As I was stating before, in general, does event start and end times I don't have executed or implemented, should I say. And I wanted this to be something that can be easily loaded in and enabled or disabled based on, the progression of time. But that seems to interfere more with certain people who may not use my same daylight time system. Mind you, since I did bring over the actual ticking of the time to the main system, I didn't have anything that, as of right now, could easily be a implementable option to be able to load the events during runtime, because I know that, depending on how many people are trying to access the database and bring up new data, it wasn't efficient enough in my head to be able to implement that yet. But I would think what I probably should have done is load the events in and then use the time frame to enable and disable the ability for the interaction for that NPC when it's outside of that time zone that NPC is supposed to be active, as well as have another flag on the actual NPC that will show it or hide it based on the time of day, even though that could create a pop type of effect for an NPC being there or not. I've seen things in Final Fantasy to where if an NPC is supposed to be there that's time based and you're in the area, it's not going to pop up until you leave visually that area and then visually come back within the area where the NPC is supposed to be, and he would have he or she would have magically appeared. And since this is just an example case, I just wanted to leave the functionality here and leave an idea of how you would implement that. So if you want to add that to your game, you could. Mind you, that scenario probably be somewhat cost heavy because you have to see what the line of sight of the NPC is to the player and be able to do things based on the line of sight trace. But for right now, I just left it there. Have fun with it however you want to. Pretty much explained this whole cutscene and how it operates. It's just pretty much a toggle back and forth between events and jumping back and forth between the actual sequence. I guess the next part I'll talk about the enemy placements and things like that. I think I've covered the field actions already. I mean, that's just general extra stuff that I wanted to add in for just example purposes. I'm also using it for my game, but you know, if anybody could benefit from any of this and who don't know how to implement anything like that, I just left it here for general educations. That's it for the events in general. See you in the next video.